working to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles. We're moving to the next stage of the pandemic, and as the world resets to the new normal, we find ourselves seeking the right balance between health and livelihood, constantly adjusting the boundaries between liberty and responsibility. Welcome to ASEAN in Focus. First, Vietnam officially opened the 36th ASEAN Summit, a virtual summit held via teleconferencing because of the coronavirus pandemic. Prime Minister Nguyen Xuan Phuc presided over the opening session. Let's listen in.
In the early months of this year, COVID-19 has taken heavy toll on the economy and society of ASEAN member states. It pains us to witness the suffering of tens of thousands of families whose loved ones pass away due to the disease. We empathize with the damage and difficulties experienced by hundreds of thousands of disrupted businesses and millions of workers deprived of their livelihood, especially those in tourism and service sector. Yet, we shall not falter. ASEAN has taken timely actions as a responsive and cohesive community. Our health emergencies response network and cooperation with partners were activated from the very first days. ASEAN countries have engaged in active information and experience sharing and coordination in disease control, and thanks to the highest of political commitment and cohesive and comprehensive approach at the national and regional level, ASEAN as a whole has embodied the fortitude of a united and cohesive group full of sharing and caring. Let me thank you, ASEAN leaders and ASEAN partners, who have joined their hands with Vietnam, the ASEAN chair, in the collective response against the pandemic, especially the strong commitments that you have pledged at this special ASEAN and the ASEAN +3 summits on COVID-19 in April. Despite the complex developments of the pandemic, ASEAN member states have essentially kept the situation under control. Compared to the global average, we're enjoying a high proportion of recoveries over total confirmed cases. Fatalities are low, and the rate of fatality is dropping. For many days now, in several ASEAN countries, there has been no new case of community transmission. While slower growth rates are projected for this year, ASEAN economies are expected to sustain stability, strengthen connectivity, and promote equitable and sustainable development of ASEAN. These past years will continue to be bolstered during this year. Such initiatives as the ASEAN Smart Cities Network and connecting the connectivities need to proceed effectively and extensively. In addition, we should also pay due attention to enhancing the complementarities and linkages between sub-regional cooperation, including the Mekong sub-region and ASEAN agenda. We're strongly committed to economic liberalization and integration, and are determined to quickly conclude the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP.
Meanwhile, trade ministers of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, participating countries have reaffirmed their commitment to conclude the trade deal among ASEAN and its free trade agreement partners, which is Australia, New Zealand, China, South Korea, and Japan. During the 10th RCEP intersessional ministerial meeting via the video conference on Tuesday, the Department of Trade and Industry Secretary Ramon Lopez said the trade agreement will play a vital role in economic recovery as countries suffered from the pandemic. Now, RCEP negotiations started in 2012. Here's Tran Tuan An, Vietnam's Minister of Trade and Industry. Let's listen in.
Thank you. It's good to see you all again.
The signing of the RCEP agreement will send a positive signal to the world about our regional resilience and tolerance. We need to seize this moment to reform our economy so that we can soon bounce back and assert our central position in world economy. For that reason, it is more urgent than ever for our countries to tighten our relationship and strengthen economic integration in trade and investments.
During the Philippines' hosting of ASEAN Summit in 2017, participating countries targeted concluding FTA. However, India, which was part of the trade deal, has been reportedly dragging the negotiations as it wasn't ready to commit at the level of tariff lines to be liberalized. In the third RCEP summit last year, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi backed out of the FTA. RCEP countries remain open if India wants to return to RCEP. India's return would also mean it'll have a free trade deal with China. India and China currently have a rising border tension, and earlier this week, Indian officials put on hold about $600 million worth of business deals with Chinese firms amid the border clash with China. Okay, first let's go to Thailand. In Pattaya, the city's mayor said that the nightlife is ready for business and he has agreed to obey new normal regulations. Esther Odanga joins us live from Pattaya.
Sawadee ka. Good afternoon, Alma, and to all our viewers around the world. So here's the latest update over here in Pattaya, Thailand. According to Pattaya News, the city father of Pattaya says the city's nightlife is ready to get back to business whilst agreeing to obey all the regulations that govern reopening in the aftermath of COVID-19. Mayor Santaya Kamplum says venues are anxious to open their doors once again and willing to comply with the 22 rules outlined by the government this week. Here are some of the rules provided by the government. Overall crowd must be continued, temperature screening, provide alcohol gel, disposable menus, stage or performance area should have a plastic partition and not more than 5 people in a table. He says the normally vibrant city has been devastated by the closure of thousands of bars, clubs, live music, venues, and all other nightlife for over 3 months now. The closure was ordered throughout Thailand as part of a government lockdown during the COVID-19 crisis. Pattaya is usually a thriving tourist hotspot, and the effects of lockdown have dealt a sharp blow to the city's nightlife with countless venues closed for good. While Mayor Kamplum acknowledged the new rules are tough, he expects them to be relaxed in time provided there is no further outbreak of the virus. He says allowing nightlife venues to reopen is the first step, and that arguing or modifying rules can come later. But bars and clubs that rely on foreign tourists are expected to struggle with no confirmed date for when international flights may be allowed to resume or indeed who will be granted entry. However, bars who get the bulk of their business from locals, both Thais and expats, are feeling a bit more positive about turning a profit. Back to you, Alma.
All right. Thank you very much, Esther, for your updates there in Pattaya.
Reporting live from Pattaya, Thailand, this is Esther Adanga. We live in interesting times.
All right, to Vietnam now. On Friday, the country warned the virus pandemic had swept away years of economic gains at the opening of the 36th ASEAN Summit, virtual summit held via teleconferencing because of the coronavirus pandemic. Joining us live from Vietnam is Chriselle Lacuna. Hello, Chriselle.
Hello, Alma. Good afternoon to you and to all of to everybody who's watching. Here's the latest from Vietnam. A little COVID-19 update. Vietnam goes 71 days without COVID-19 community infection. Vietnam entered the 71st day without confirming new COVID-19 infection case in the community, said the National Steering Committee for COVID-19 Prevention and Control on Friday morning. Among 352 COVID-19 patients in the country, 329 have been cleared of the virus, making up about 93.5% of recovery. The patient tally includes 212 imported cases immediately quarantined upon their arrivals. Let's go over our headline number 1. 36 ASEAN Summit opens. During the summit, leaders of 10 ASEAN member countries are expected to focus on the development of the ASEAN community in the immediate future and measures to address the social and economic impacts of the COVID-19 crisis in the region. According to the Deputy Foreign Minister and the head of SOM Vietnam, Win Cook Yung, at the plenary session, the leaders will hear reports and give opinions on cooperation among ASEAN member nations in the 3 pillars of ASEAN community: political security, economics, and socio-cultural issues. The leaders will propose measures to strengthen cooperation between ASEAN and its partners in the time to come. They are also expected to compare notes on regional and international issues of common concern, with a focus on how to effectively deal with the COVID-19 pandemic while promptly recovering socioeconomic development in the region at the same time. Another headline, Alma, Vietnam Prime Minister warns of economic calamity at ASEAN Summit. Vietnam on Friday, June 26, warned that the virus pandemic had swept away years of economic gains as Southeast Asian leaders met online for a summit that will also be dominated by anxiety over Beijing's moves in the flashpoint South China Sea. The current chair of ASEAN also wants to use the summit to inject momentum into talks into sprawling China-backed trade pact, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, a deal which aimed to loop in half of the world's population and third of its GDP, has been hampered by India's refusal to join over access to its market for cheap goods from China, the regional superpower with whom it is now locked in a deadly border row. There is also increasing angst that the virus and its fallout has provided cover for China to make new plays in the South China Sea, the resource-rich waterway Beijing claims most of it, but it is also contested by Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, and Taiwan. China is always advancing its pieces on the South China Sea chessboard, a senior Southeast Asian diplomat told Agence France Presse. So it is not out of the blue that they're doing it during this crisis. Beijing took advantage of the Asian financial crisis in the late 90s and the SARS outbreak to push its claims, he added. And I quote, "If there is a space, they move," end quote. Without directly mentioning China, Mr. Fook admitted that strategic problems between big countries had become clear and had deepened. And I quote, "While the world is trying its best to fight the pandemic, there were irresponsible acts violating international laws that affected the security and stability of some regions, including ours," end quote. In April, Vietnam accused Beijing of sinking a trawler, prompting the United States to warn it was exploiting the distraction of other states to expand its unlawful claims. Vietnam expert Carl Thayer, an academic at the University of New South Wales, believes that the past few months have been business as usual for China, but noted that negotiations on the so-called Code of Conduct for the South China Sea had stalled because of the virus. And I quote, "It needs to be restarted," end quote, he said. So far, that's the latest from Vietnam. Alma?
All right. Thank you very much, Chriselle, for your time. Thank you, EBC Vietnam Bureau.
From EBC Vietnam, Chriselle Yacuna, we'll live in interesting times.
Okay, Eagle News, ASEAN in Focus. We'll be right back.
Patindi ng patindi at tuloy-tuloy ang pagpapakita ng galing ng ating mga TNG aspirants.
You're just too good to be true. Open up, you came to get it wrong with a name, I should have drunk you back when I was a child.
Abangan ng kanilang performances sa pinakamalaking talent competition sa buong bansa, Tagisan ng Galing.
Tagisan ng Galing is presented by SMC Infrastructure, building a better world. Sandig sugar-free white coffee, puno ng white coffee taste without the sugar, kaya lower calories. Try mo na Sandig sugar-free white coffee. Sarap ng white coffee, now sugar-free. Vet-approved Nutri-Chunks, the only premium dog food with active boost for optimum energy and prebiotics that help strengthen immunity. Just like Catherine Bernardo, gawing listo ganado ang fur babies niyo. Listo ganado sa Nutri-Chunks. Magnolia Chicken Templados, delicious, ready to cook and freshly marinated daily. Pure Foods Luncheon Meat, pure sarap for every family. Star Chunky Cheese Corned Beef, ang cheesy ng corned beef mo. Walang duda, kids can tell na #1 ang Pure Foods Tender Juicy. Ang tender, ang juicy, ang sarap. Co-presented by Cooper, expert in air conditioning and electromechanical. Also engaged in structural, electrical, fire protection, plumbing, and sanitary services. Cooper, your ultimate NEPS and air conditioning solutions. Unlad Incorporated International, fight against global poverty. New San Jose Builders Incorporated. Canrib Corporation, your ventilation and air conditioning specialist. Vita Herbs Philippines Green Coffee, masarap, mabango, at healthy pa. Puerto Rico Resort and Convention Center, Cabiao, Nueva Ecija. I love Puerto Rico. In participation with Rain or Shine Elastomeric Waterproofing Paint, Matinco, R Square Variables Incorporated, Compizel Enterprises, Saisho International Trading Corporation, DN Steel, EMAC UPB Roof Corporation.
Hey, Gretchen Ho here, and I'm a white coffee lover. Creamy kasi, and very yummy. Pero mas masarap kung hindi nakaka-guilty. Check my new discovery, Sandmade Sugar-Free White Coffee. Puno ng white coffee taste without the sugar, kaya lower calories. Try mo na! Sandmade Sugar-Free White Coffee. Sarap ng white coffee, now sugar-free.
Skyway Stages 1 and 2, the elevated toll road system project, run from a section of the South Luzon Expressway from Alabang to Magallanes, Makati. The Skyway Stage 3 is an elevated expressway connecting the South Luzon Expressway through the existing Skyway Stages 1 and 2 to the North Luzon Expressway via Balintawak. Skyway Stage 4 is an 80-kilometer mixed elevated and at-grade toll road that will connect the existing Skyway system starting from the FTI section all the way to Bulacan.
Listo at ganado ang baby ko sa vet-approved Nutri-Chunks with active boost and prebiotics na pampalisto. Made with real meat, with essential nutrients to help them grow healthy and happy. Listo, ganado sa Nutri-Chunks.
Ikaw lang ang star ng buhay ko. Para sa akin, perfect ka. Ang cheesy ng corned beef mo. Pag Star Chunky Cheese Corned Beef, sarap ng corned beef, inangat pa ng real cheese cubes. Star Chunky Cheese Corned Beef.
All right, welcome back. And we would like to welcome to the program a very special guest, His Excellency Chito Santa Romana, the Philippine Ambassador to China. Good afternoon from Manila, Mr. Ambassador.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Ambassador, now that China has reopened, but I know there is a second wave, how is everyone coping right now in China?
Actually, on the whole, the situation in China has improved considerably. I mean, today the report is it's down to double-digit all over China, and it's really in Beijing. There's a report dito 11 infections, which by international standards or even by Philippine standards is very low, and so it's really under control. Kaya dito sa Beijing, however, before this kasi, this was before around June 11, June 12, around the time of our Independence Day.
Yes.
They had gone for 2 months, almost 2 months in Beijing na zero. Kaya when there was a cluster, sunod-sunod for several days, mga 30 cases and then 20 cases. Now it's down to double-digit and the other day single-digit.
it's improving, and they're trying to cut off itong community transmission.
Yes.
It started from a large wholesale market dito sa Beijing.
Yes.
And it's a place which is the biggest in China and the biggest in Asia, actually.
Yes.
Wholesale market. Doon nag-umpisa na detect yung infections. And most of the cases actually have to do with that market. Kaya sinarado na yung market, and then samples were taken of the market, trying to detect where it originated. Ang suspicion nila, because they found the samples in a chopping block that they used for cutting imported salmon.
Yes.
Kaya for a while, nagka-panic dito. Nobody wanted to touch salmon. Kaya I couldn't
Sarap pa
eat
naman ng
sashimi
salmon.
for the past 2 weeks. They halted the imports of salmon from Norway and other countries. And then, pero ngayon, the experts are saying that the chances na the food on carrier or that the salmon on carrier is very low, very unlikely. Most likely either of two possibilities, they say. One is na in the process of packaging or processing the salmon, from where it came from to transmission to import and transport to Beijing, kasi usually it's placed in a cold storage. Now in a cold storage, it's possible for the virus to continue existing, no? So that's one possibility na the carrier, it's not the fish itself, kundi yung packaging or yung storage during the storage. And the other possibility is that the one who was cutting or handling the salmon was infected already.
Oh.
Kaya human to human transmission pa rin. Pero as of now, the effort is really to contain it. In a sense, yung Chinese authorities here are employing a softer version of the Wuhan lockdown strategy. Kasi sa Wuhan, drastic eh.
Yes.
They locked down the whole city. Everything was cut off. You couldn't move. Dito ang ginawa nila, I mean, I can still go out. You have to wear a mask. The area where the embassy is not considered a high-risk area. So they classified yung mga areas na high-risk, medium risk, and low risk at nag-lockdown doon sa high risk. And the high risk area are basically the districts or the neighborhood communities where there are the infected persons na usually related to the market. Kaya the district around the market, practically the whole district, is considered a high risk area. Yun ang tight lockdown. Pero so soft in the sense na hindi buong city under lockdown.
Yes.
Partial lang. Pero meron ding aspect na parehong kamukha na sa Wuhan in the sense na ang airport basically, practically, kinancel nila almost all flights. Para noon, hindi makalabas ang taga-Beijing at hindi makapasok ang galing sa labas. But principally, to prevent people from Beijing from traveling within the country or abroad, unless, and this is the exception, unless you can show a certificate that you took a swab test during the past week before your departure at negative. Only then can you leave. So, in a sense, lockdown ang Beijing in terms of travel in and out. Pero in terms of movement within the city, there's still traffic. Kumonti yung sa mga people taking the bus and the subway kasi they prefer to bike or to drive on their own, fearing infection.
Yes.
So that's the situation in Beijing, particularly kasi the epicenter of this cluster is really in Beijing.
Yes.
Pero the good news is no news of any Filipino infected by the virus. So all the ones we've heard about are really Chinese merchants or Chinese shop assistants or people who went to the market, to that big market, and for supplies or for shopping. Yun ang talaga naging source ng cluster. Ang problema, because some of the people, I mean, surrounding provinces around Beijing, pupunta rin dito because it's a wholesale market, to bring their goods or to take some goods themselves and buy and bring it to their provinces. There are around 5 provinces around Beijing na merong infect or merong cases na related dito sa wholesale market dito sa Beijing. So the struggle still goes on, although under control in the sense na they have been able to reduce yung number that they detected, the number of infected persons, and daily the rate is now down to low double digit, as I said, 11 today. No, so the other day it was 7. So the goal, of course, is to reduce it to practically 0 as much as possible, and then to go back to where Beijing was before, no? 2 months na 0. So that's why nagkaroon ng konting panic, and ang particularly affected yung consumption of salmon and Japanese restaurants, as well as restaurants din nagsaraduhan ulit, or people have basically stayed home and been eating at home and cooking because of his mild
scare
case of panic sa Beijing.
Yes. But Mr. Ambassador, I did a little bit of research. I know that aggressive mass testing has been boosted due to the sudden rise of infections, and I would just like to ask, is it possible that the surge in transmission due to so-called imported cases, because out of the 4,634 deaths, it has been reported that 1,805 cases were from newly arrived from other countries?
Actually, before this outbreak that is being attributed to this wholesale market erupted, Beijing, China actually was able to control the local community transmission. And the cases that happened after that was from Chinese coming from abroad, you know, from the US, from Europe, from Asia, coming back to in a sense, I guess, to flee from those places. But some of them, when you arrive in Beijing now or in any Chinese airport, they subject you to a swab test right away. Okay, they can detect. And while waiting for the result of the swab test, you wait in a quarantine area. You have to stay there for a couple of days. And of course, kung positive, they put you right away, they isolate you, no? Kung negative yung swab test, still 14-day quarantine, mandatory, in a designated quarantine area. Talaga nag-iingat sila, and international flights arriving in Beijing since March, they don't really arrive in Beijing. They arrive in around more than a dozen designated cities around China. For example, from the Philippines or from other parts of Asia, babagsak ka in a city east of Beijing called Qingdao. And that's where you stay for 2 weeks quarantine at saka swab test. Kung clear lahat yun, then you can proceed to Beijing. So they were really protecting Beijing. Kaya when this thing happened, and in a sense, they're looking at this cluster as parang imported case, imported food, or whoever got contaminated, got exposed to a contamination from somebody or something that was imported. Kaya yun ang fear nila talaga, is importation of cases, because the whole world is going through the pandemic. And it just shows how true the saying is, nobody's safe unless everybody is safe. True. As long as the pandemic goes on, there's always a risk. Kaya itong lesson sa Beijing is really, this thing could go in waves. You could have 0 cases for a couple of weeks or months, and then bigla na lang may susulpot, no? Na there is a loophole that you forgot to pay attention to. And in this case, they're looking very much at the importation of food, particularly yung handling. So very tight ngayon yung requirements for imported food.
Mr. Ambassador, I also remember that the travel ban to mainland China has been lifted for OFWs back in March. At least 265 OFWs are waiting to be repatriated, and they're from Guangzhou, Shanghai, and Beijing. Will flights between China and Manila be arranged soon as sweeper flights for our OFWs?
Well, the problem is on both sides. There are here Filipinos who lost their jobs or whose contracts have expired, who want to go home. There are almost 400 to 500 of them waiting for air. Some of them can afford, to pay for their regular airline ticket, but now that there are hardly any airline flights, they have to wait. And for a time, there was a single flight per week by Air China. But even that now has been canceled several times. But the prices started to go up, to double, and even triple. So it was out of reach. So that's one set of problems. There are 400 to 500 here waiting to go home. And then second is those who got stranded in the Philippines. Yes, you're right. 200 plus, no? Wanting to come back here. Ang problema, it's now on one is the airline, and second is on the Chinese side. The Chinese have a ruling that even if you have a valid visa, as of mid-March, or late March actually, the end of March, all those visas are considered no longer valid. You have to apply for a new one, and they are not issuing them unless it's very necessary for business reasons, for emergency reason or humanitarian reasons. Otherwise, basically, sarado pa rin ang China for now. Hopefully, when we overcome this outbreak in Beijing, and I expect, hopefully, in another week or two, we could be down to single digit or even zero, and then you have to wait for it to 2 weeks or so before they will again declare now we can reopen. So hopefully, sometime in July and most likely August, unless there is another outbreak or another wave, only then can we solve these problems. So that's really the plight of overseas Filipinos here, as well as those who went home, nasaraduhan sila when they were in the Philippines, and now they're waiting to come back, hindi sila makabalik. There is a third group, actually, mga seafarers. They're actually not working in China, but they were working for Chinese shipping companies na because of the pandemic, nawala yung orders, they had to go back to port, wala silang ginagawa. The Chinese government do not want to allow them to disembark itong Filipino crews because they came from abroad and because nag-iingat sila dito.
Yes.
So they're just waiting off the coast of some ports in southern China, in this case of Fuzhou, in Fujian province, which is very near the Philippines. And there are, almost 80, 90, almost 100 Filipinos in 5 or 6 boats just waiting out there. They've been waiting for several weeks and some as long as 3 months. Some of them are complaining about the food and the water, so we've been trying to make arrangements with those responsible, those who hired them, the Chinese company, who are now encountering economic problems, to ensure the food supply and the water supply of those Filipinos. And now we're having discussions to bring them back to the Philippines because there are no flights, hindi pwedeng aeroplano. So we're trying to arrange that the shipping company, the Chinese shipping company, to arrange a boat that will take the Filipino seafarers who are just waiting, and they're not, basically their contracts are now expired. So how to bring them home through this Chinese boat or a boat owned by the Chinese company and bring them to the Philippines. And of course, there are other, requirements as the Philippines, permits and all that are now being arranged. But hopefully it can be done soon in the next few days. So yun ang 3 sets of issues we're dealing with. There's a 4th set. Basically, the Filipinos who are still working, who want to stay here, but some of them, their schools are closed, they're teaching, so no work, no pay, or reduced pay. So they're in financial need and they're asking help from the government. So we've arranged food packs for them, for those in dire need. We have given out almost, 400, 500 all throughout China, maybe if you count Shanghai has the biggest number, and then Guangzhou, there's also a big number. And in Beijing and Northeast China, there are also several dozens there. So easily over 500 food packs to Filipinos who still want to stay here and work, but who are encountering temporary difficulties because of either reduced pay or because their work units are not yet open, So yun ang the issues we are confronting here at present.
Mr. Ambassador, this is also the 45th year of diplomatic relations between China and the Philippines. And
yes,
last June 15, China donated 3 million kilos of rice to families affected by the COVID-19.
Yes, actually, originally, as you know, the best laid plans of mice and men got hit by this pandemic. Originally, the plan was to have a grand celebration. We were here in Beijing, our plan was to have a grand reception to celebrate it, Of course, because of the pandemic, because of the new cluster, actually, that happened in Beijing, mass gatherings are not allowed. So we had a virtual celebration, composing of several things. One, of course, and you know about this, is the phone call between President Duterte and President Xi Jinping. That happened on, I believe, June 12 or 13, to celebrate the 45th anniversary, as well as an occasion to talk about the situation on the COVID, how to cooperate more closely. And then second, since we had to cancel the grand celebration here, we had our own flag raising ceremony here in the embassy, limited lang to the embassy and staff, and we observed proper distancing, and we put out the pictures of that and on our chat group with the Philippine community. I also had a video message for the Philippine community to greet everybody, both on Independence Day as well as the 45th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations. So despite the pandemic, we still managed at least to commemorate both the 45th anniversary and the Independence Day, even on a virtual basis, both to continue the spirit of celebrating and at the same time to ensure the safety of everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Do you have any message for our viewers this afternoon?
Well, I think we should bear in mind the lessons here in China. Despite the best efforts of the Chinese authorities to control the pandemic, and they have succeeded to a great extent, still there is the danger of the second wave, both particularly from imported cases, as well as now as we're seeing, if we're lax, also in case of some imported products that could contain the virus, particularly those that are subject to cold storage. So this really entails the need for high vigilance. You see, this pandemic will be with us for a while, and we have to learn to live with it. It will probably occur in waves. We'll be able to bring it down to single digits or even to zero for weeks or even for months. But unless the vaccine is developed and is successful, the virus could still come out and emerge in different ways. And as we are seeing around the world right now, it's happening now in Africa, in Latin America, in Mexico, in Russia. So, and the US is still raging strongly. So unless everybody is safe, nobody is really safe. And the need for vigilance for everyone is definitely a requirement. So hopefully we will learn from the best practices, not only in China, but from other countries around the world, as we try to make the economy rebound or to make the economy recover, and at the same time how to balance public health and economic recovery.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your time. And I see that you are still positive and lively in spite of all the problems around us. Maraming salamat po. Thank you for your time, Ambassador.
Maraming salamat din. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right, let's go back to Thailand. In Phuket, the immigration there said that there is no more 24-hour reporting for expats arriving or leaving their properties. Joining us live from Phuket, Thailand is Mary Grace Alvarez.
Good afternoon, Alma.
Good afternoon.
Our viewers.
Go ahead.
Yes, Alma. By the way, I'm here at Old Phuket Town, which is famous for its blossoming street art scene. And now, bringing you the latest updates from the island. According to Phuket News, the Phuket immigration has confirmed they have received an order, making it no longer necessary for landlords of properties with foreign tenants to report within 24 hours every time the foreigner arrives or leaves the property. If the foreigner is staying on a multiple entry visa or has an extension of stay or enters using a re-entry permit, Consul General Naruwat of Phuket Immigration confirmed the rule changed last June 24. Under the previous PM30 requirements, property owners and managers were to report each time a foreigner arrived at the premises within 24 hours, even if the foreigner had stayed elsewhere for only a short period of time. The rule change makes this no longer necessary for foreigners staying on a multiple entry visa or an extension stay and re-enters Thailand using an entry permit. The order is to take effect on June 30. The new rule apparently does not apply to those on visa-exempt entries and single-entry visa of any category unless they left and entered using a re-entry permit during the original entry. Thai Visa noted in their report of the rule change. Colonel Naruwat today also urged foreigners intending on visiting the Phuket Immigration Office in person to book first appointment through the QQ app, and it is available on App Store and Google Play. He also added they don't want a lot of people to gather in the office as they are following the new normal measures. Meanwhile, Alma, according to Bangkok Post, about 50,000 selected foreigners to start arriving next week. Mr. Chawisin Visanayutin, spokesman of the Center for COVID-19 Situation Administration, said on Wednesday, June 24. Elaborated on the government's plan to allow foreign national bats into the country. The plan was drafted by a subcommittee of CCSA. He also added most will be required to accept a 14-day quarantine after their arrival. They include about 30,000 people expected to arrive for medical and wellness tourism. Others include about 15,400 skilled workers, 2,000 teachers, educational personnel and students, 2,000 foreigners with Thai families or with residences in Thailand, and 700 business people and investors. Members of this group have already registered and agreed to undergo quarantine. Another group to be admitted includes business people and investors who will pay short visits and guests of the government and governmental organizations. However, Alma, they would be tested for COVID-19 before and upon arrival, have health insurance, and be monitored by medical personnel. A further group to be welcome consists of tourists and travelers who would arrive under the Travel Bubble scheme. Details for this group had yet to be finalized. Foreign business people, investors who accepted quarantine could arrive immediately. Skilled workers, experts, people with Thai families, and residents in Thailand, educational personnel and students, business people and investors with short visits, and guests of the government would be allowed on July 1. Those who would arrive for medical and wellness tourism could also arrive on July 1. Under the travel bubble scheme could be allowed on August 1 on condition they undergo villa quarantine, meaning they stay in their accommodation and do not travel. He also added the draft measures would be submitted to the CCSA for consideration next Monday, June 29. Their arrivals were expected to boost investment and tourism income. Back to you, Alma.
Thank you very much, Mary Grace, for your updates there. Stay safe, stay healthy.
Thank you very much, Alma. Live from Phuket, Thailand. This is Mary Grace Alvarez, and we live in interesting times.
To Sri Lanka now, up to 100 people can now gather at places of worship as restrictions are eased. Vanessa Viloria Silva joins us live. Hello, Vanessa.
Hi, Alma. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Go ahead.
Yes, here's the latest update here in Sri Lanka, with the government increasingly confident that there is no community spread of the COVID-19 virus. The last patient reported from the community was on April 30. The health authorities says there is a relaxation of the rules where people gather. Senior officials at the Ministry of Health told that temples, convents, churches, and mosques can now hold worship for 100 people at a time. The number to gather at weddings and political rallies has also been increased to 100, they said. Previously, all gatherings were limited to 50 individuals. However, strict instructions have been given to ensure all the attendees adhere to the Health Ministry COVID-19 guidelines, such as the wearing of masks and the maintenance of social distancing at least 1 meter. And another update, Alma, the number of persons tested positive for coronavirus has surged up to 2007, with 6 new infections identified yesterday, June 25. Official records confirm 394 patients are being treated in hospital, while 36 more are being under inspection, according to the Health Promotion Bureau statistics. Meanwhile, 1,602 patients have been recovered so far, and death toll remains unchanged at 11. Back to you, Alma.
All right. Thank you very much, Vanessa, for your updates there in Sri Lanka.
Thank you so much, Alma. Reporting live from Sri Lanka, this is Vanessa Viloria Silva, and we live in interesting times.
The UNHCR adopted a resolution urging the repatriation of the Rohingyas in Myanmar. Arabel Pasqua joins us live from Bangladesh. Hello, Arabel.
Good afternoon, Alma. Here are the latest updates in Bangladesh. The United Nations Human Rights Council has adopted a resolution urging the repatriation of the Rohingya people in Myanmar. The permanent mission of Bangladesh to Geneva stated a resolution titled Human Rights Situation in Myanmar was adopted at the current session of the Assembly. The resolution further called upon countries to continue providing support in this regard until the repatriation is complete and praised Bangladesh for providing the Rohingya people with refuge. Bangladesh shelters nearly 1.1 million Rohingya in camps at Cox's Bazar since mass exodus in August 2017 in the face of threat from Myanmar army. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's administration reached an agreement with Myanmar government towards the end of 2017 for the repatriation, but not a single refugee has gone back. Also, the UK exerted an increased pressure on Myanmar for solving the Rohingya crisis urgently through sustainable repatriation of the Rohingya refugees to Rakhine. The Foreign Minister of Bangladesh spoke with the UK International Development Secretary about the economic and social impact of COVID-19 in Bangladesh, including the challenge of job loss by a significant number of Bangladeshi migrant workers abroad, particularly in the Middle East. He requested the support of the UK in overcoming this difficulty. The foreign minister flagged that Myanmar has not done anything for the repatriation of the Rohingya refugees. He insisted that until international community exerts more pressure on Myanmar, including by putting trade and investment moratorium, the Rohingya crisis will not be resolved. A quick update of COVID-19 situation in Bangladesh, Alma. The caseload soared to 126,606 cases with 1,621 deaths and 51,495 recoveries. Back to you, Alma.
All right. Thank you very much, Arabel, for your updates there. Thank you, EBC Bangladesh Bureau.
Reporting live from Bangladesh, I am Arabel Pasqua. We live in interesting times.
And the beautiful island of Maldives is now preparing to revive its tourism. Steffi Diwan joins us live. Hello, Steffi.
Yes, Alma. Here's the latest news for today. Minister of Tourism Al-Wahid on Wednesday confirmed that safety measures for restarting tourism currently in stasis due to the global pandemic would carry on with the same vigor seen across Maldives' COVID-19 response. Minister Wahid said that if Maldives double its collective effort to ensure health safety, the probability that borders would have to be closed again was much lower. The Soli administration, he assured, would remain vigilant in detecting and containing the virus. The minister stressed on the government's confidence that citizens would abide by the measures set in place by the Health Protection Agency, adding that the response would continue until a cure or vaccine for the novel coronavirus was discovered and made readily available. He also noted that the government would not hesitate to enforce travel restrictions should Maldives face a second wave of infections. Meanwhile, setting a new course for Maldives' billion-dollar industry, resorts across the archipelago are presently scheduled to reopen their luxurious doors on July 15, while guest houses will begin welcoming guests in August. On the day itself, 3 commercial flights are confirmed to arrive at Belana International Airport. Wahid affirmed that while 11 airlines have already approached Belana International Airport to resume operations, over 41 resorts are reportedly ready to pamper holidaymakers as well. As a further 30 resorts have also made similar remarks, the ministry estimated by mid of July, half of Maldives' thriving 145 properties strong resort industry would be back up and running. Similarly, Maldives Airports Company Limited or MACL formerly revealed that 10 airlines have already filed the land flights at Belana International Airport. Wahid attributed Maldives having reaching this point to numerous efforts made by various government entities, which he said provided the necessary breathing room to proceed with economic repairs, making a reference to the floating hospital that the tourism minister had previously said the government would acquire. Wahid said that by establishing a medical facility in Hulhumale, the incumbent had demonstrated a vision for more long-term solution. And for additional COVID-19 case updates as of 6 p.m. confirmed an additional 17 cases of COVID-19 infections in Maldives with a total number of 2,277 cases. And that's the latest news for today, Alma. Back to you, Alma.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Steph, for your updates there.
Thank you so much, Alma. Reporting live from Maldives, this is Steffi Di Juan, and we live in interesting lives.
Thank you. To Cambodia now, the government has launched cash handouts for its poor citizens. Ed Boyosi joins us live from Phnom Penh. Hello, Ed.
Hi, Alma. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to all our viewers. Yeah, the government of the Kingdom of Cambodia has launched yesterday the cash handout program for poor and vulnerable citizens during the COVID-19 pandemic. It planned to spend $25 million a month, assisting 600,000 families, totaling 2.3 million people. On the same day, the first round of cash handouts was delivered. Last June 12, a sub-decree was signed by Cambodia's Prime Minister Hun Sen, wherein poor families in Phnom Penh and qualified families in central city areas outside the capital will receive cash handouts of 120,000 reals, equivalent to $30 per month from the government. Department of Social Wellbeing Director Chur Supanya confirmed at the Office of the Council of Ministers on Thursday that poor recipients had to take their social protection cards to their nearest commune headquarters to collect the money. According to Mr. Supanya, systems have been set up. The department has arranged a transparent and accountable way to give out the cash. Recipients can use their social protection card numbers to open their accounts. Once a recipient gets cash for the first time, they will then receive announcements for the next handout every 2 months. The Ministry's Secretary of State, Samhing Boru, said that as of Thursday afternoon, He said more than 8,000 families had received 1.58 billion reals or 385,000 US dollars. Mr. Boros said some families could get even between $50 to $100 if they have many children, people with disabilities, older people, or HIV positive family members. The Ministry of Social Affairs, Veterans, and Youth Rehabilitation has advised citizens who hold social protection cards to visit their commune headquarters to receive the government cash handouts. On other news, Alma, 158 Cambodian students and migrant workers arrived from Kuala Lumpur this morning via Malaysia Airlines flight MH754. This is the second flight to bring Cambodians home from Malaysia. Last March, Cambodia reported 34 COVID-19 cases after a group of people returned from a Muslim religious gathering in Malaysia. They were later found to have passed the disease on to 9 more people. Also, one passenger from the first repatriation flight from Malaysia last June 16 has tested positive of the virus. Since June 23, Cambodia has not detected a new case, keeping the country's count at 130. Of the total, 128 have recovered, while 2 are still hospitalized. Since last month, the government has already tightened measures against passengers returning from abroad. All passengers have to be scanned for COVID-19, and if anyone tests positive, everyone on the plane must be quarantined at a government-managed facility. If a passenger tests negative for the disease, he can quarantine at home, although foreigners will be quarantined at designated hotels. Back to you, Alma.
Thank you very much, Ed, for your updates there in Cambodia.
Thank you so much, Alma. Reporting live here in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, I'm Eduardo Vaivio Jr., and we live in interesting times.
All right, and joining us live from Kuala Lumpur is Gail Aldos. Hello, Gail.
Hello, Alma.
Yes, your updates for us, Gail. Go ahead.
For the latest news here in Malaysia, government allows entry of critically ill healthcare travelers. The Malaysian government has allowed the entry of healthcare travelers involving critically ill patients who require treatment of the intensive care unit ICU or high dependency unit HDU. Senior Minister Security Cluster Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob said the permission are for those categorized under Phase 1A and 1B to be in use during the Recovery Movement Control Order RMCO, and while international travel restrictions are in force. He said a special ministerial meeting on the implementation of the Movement Control Order MCO has agreed to allow the entry of foreigners for health tourism purposes. He also said permission for Phase 1A travelers is only given for travel by air, and only one caregiver is allowed to accompany the patient. However, for patients under the age of 12, 2 caregivers are allowed, but the caregivers must be in the same room with the patient throughout the treatment period. Ismail Sabri said for Phase 1A, permission will be given to travelers with serious illness, including cancer and heart problems. He elaborated for that foreigners involved are required to obtain appointment letters, first from hospitals registered with the Malaysian Healthcare Travel Council MHTC. In addition, they also need to undergo COVID-19 screening 3 days before entering Malaysian borders and complete the pre-entry conditions, including downloading the MySejahtera application. Upon arriving at the airport, transportation to the hospitals must be arranged by the hospital and MHTC. Meanwhile, Ismail Sabri said the Police Compliance Operations Task Force conducted 65,937 inspections yesterday. He said through the inspections, 4 individuals were detained for violating the RMCO. Back to you, Alma.
All right. Thank you very much, Gail, for your updates there in Kuala Lumpur. Thank you, EBC Kuala Lumpur Bureau.
Reporting live from Malaysia Bureau, this is Gail Albers. We live in interesting times.
All right. Thank you very much. And just an update, the theme for this year's ASEAN Summit is a cohesive and responsive ASEAN. President Duterte will discuss in the ASEAN Virtual Summit the welfare of the Filipino migrant workers, what lessons have we learned from the COVID pandemic, and terms of taking care of the welfare of our migrant workers So we will be following this developing story as we go along and later on Eagle News International. And that is the latest news in the Southeast Asian nations. Stay updated about the ASEAN region. I'm Alma Angeles. We live in interesting times.